Okay, guys, thank you so much for your patience, everybody, and welcome to on Let's Only Be Positive live broadcasting YouTube channel that I'm doing tonight. And tonight I have a special speaker, Kevin Brady. Hey, Kevin, welcome to. Yay, how are you?
Good.
All right, and I know you got some really awesome information, awesome knowledge to share with us tonight. And the subject is going to be about identities and perception. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Awesome. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of tell us about yourself and who you are and what you do, and we'll just take it from there. So.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Just so you know, this is one of the first times that I've been able to speak publicly. So I'm going to read a little bit from a prepared statement, and then from there we can go into a conversation and take questions and things. It's a very short statement. So my name is Kevin Brady. I'm here to talk about achieving goals, living with a sense of purpose, and defining success in your own terms. Along the way, we'll discuss what an identity is, how they're created, why they're created, and how it can be that we get stuck to them, or can be able to occupy one or unable to occupy one for a large number of reasons. I have a private practice using methods created by Dr. Frank Brady and a number of other contributors. Most of what I do revolves around two different areas of emphasis. One is helping people resolve issues that stem from overwhelming people, places, and things. And the other is helping to create a vision of a near future that is considered desirable, and then a realistic plan to achieve that vision. I don't measure success by other diagnostics than what my clients want for themselves. This allows me to tailor all sessions to the person's areas of interest and means I don't diagnose and I'm not treating anyone for any illnesses. I don't have any standard that I compare a person's progress to that they don't agree to and define for themselves. I call my practice Clear Objectives because it's focused around clearing away issues that prevent a person from achieving their own objectives. While a person may make some psychological breakthroughs in doing this, it's really a collaborative effort to draw forth what a person wants to do and what is preventing them from doing it, rather than therapy. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, more like a technician. I've been doing this for about 30 years, so along the way I've developed some of my own ideas and observations. We'll be discussing some of these and my interpretations of what I have learned. We can start by defining a few terms. I can then describe how these are related to my practice, and from there we can open up discussion, examples, and clarifications. First thing I want to define is what an identity is. So I use a model called metapsychology, and there's a textbook, I'll sort of hold it up here, that I follow called Beyond Psychology. And the definition of identity, according to that, is a package of viewpoints, tools, subsidiary awarenesses, conceptual, perceptual, and instrumental abilities that can be incorporated as part of the self in order to fulfill an intention. An identity can also include the way in which a person chooses to appear to others. So that's a lot to unpack, probably.
Very much. That's awesome. What I'm curious about is how does that impact our daily living? Like the identities that we take on, that we deal with, rather for ourselves or dealing with other people. How does the identities that we have and we encounter affect us in our daily life?
Okay, so first let's take a look at how you'd create one in the first place, and then that will bring about how it impacts your performance in life and stuff.
Okay.
A good example might be the first time you tried playing a sport, and you had no idea what position you were supposed to play, where you were supposed to be on the field or the court, how to swing a racket or kick a ball properly, what the rules of the game are. And so when you first start, you don't have an identity. Or if you do, it's not yet that of a soccer player. It's a student of soccer. You need to learn the game before you can play the game, right? So in the end, the identity becomes transparent. You don't know, you don't think to yourself, okay, now I'm going to be a soccer player. You know, you just slide into doing it because you know how, right? So maybe the 10th or 15th time you play in a soccer game, you completely forget about mechanics. You don't worry about how am I going to strike the ball. So everything starts to become automatic. That's both good and bad, right? Because it means once everything becomes automatic, you stop gaining skill, right? You are only doing things that you already know how to do and not pushing yourself to learn more. So that usually people stop when they're successful. They don't keep learning after that point. And so they get stuck at the point at which they feel successful.
Okay.
Right? So the way that could impact you as a soccer player there would be you get good enough that you can make a slide tackle, the crowd cheers, but you're not good at taking the ball away and you never learn how. So whenever you go to make the tackle, the other person might fall down or whatever, the ball goes out of control, you don't have it control for your team. You need to learn the skill, an additional skill of taking the ball away and passing and stuff like that. You can't just have one thing that you're good at, but people often do. They become one-trick ponies. They learn how to do one thing very well, and they forget about learning after that. They get very comfortable doing that one thing, and they stop being willing to occupy a new identity because it's uncomfortable. No one likes to be a rookie, you know. That's uncomfortable, stressful, difficult, and it may take years before you get to the point where you feel really good about your performance. So taking on a simple task like being a soccer player, okay, that's no big deal. But getting it to a professional level, that takes years of experience, lots of learning, and you need a great coach who doesn't think, oh, he can hit the ball. That's great. That's all we need to teach him. You know, you need to get to the point where you're very good at things, all the things involved in your activity, so you get to a point of mastery. You don't want to stop short of it, and you don't want to push yourself so hard that you can't enjoy what you're doing because all you're trying to do is learn the next skill. So there's a bit of give and take. You want to enjoy yourself while you're shifting between identities, which normally happens in the background of consciousness. It's not something where you choose, all right, now I'm going to be a girlfriend. Okay, now I'm going to be a hard worker. You know, now I'm going to be a person who answers the telephone or something like that. Those things happen in the background. You hear the phone ring, your identity switches. You answer the phone the way you almost always answer the phone usually. You don't create a new way to answer the phone. You know, people do, but usually they fall into a routine. Does that make sense?
You know what, it does. And it actually kind of makes me want to, just my next question would be, do that. We experience a lot of, like you said, this is part of the reason why there's so much limitations that people put on themselves, because they get on the comfort zone, because they take on a certain identity, but they don't want to learn a skill of it. So it's a matter of, how well do I want to, become what I do, and enjoy, to what you just said, being a soccer player and being a professional soccer player, right? Would you say that this, if you're looking at today's world and you see there's a lot of limitations in a lot of people's lives, and that they choose not to really go forward with succeeding in different, areas of their life, whether they want to be a doctor, if they want to be a soccer player, if they want to be, whatever it is they want to take on any profession. And and nowadays especially, if you look at the younger generation, more so to say, would you agree? Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say, it's just more limited. People limit themselves, and it's maybe because they simply don't know how to perfect their identity that they take on. Like, okay, the skill they enjoy is playing soccer. Maybe they just don't have the right tools to be able to have the ability to actually work and perfect. Does that make sense?
It does. And there's a couple things that come in there, right? One is early on, our identities are given to us by other people. When you're a very young child, you may create, my cat is trying to get in the picture. Sorry. You may create identities. You may play games and play roles with your friends and stuff like that. But usually what you do is you have your mom and your dad around, and you learn how, if your dad is a good person at reading, you might learn to read from him, and you learn his mannerisms. And you may see him a successful person, so he's feeding you, and a lot of your life depends on how successful your father is and how happy your mother is and how they relate together. So you learn that a woman is a person who looks like my mother, a man is a person who looks like my father. And maybe there are some other relatives that come over a lot, so you get some other models, an uncle or a brother or whatever. But your initial set of identities is fairly small. And the idea of being yourself doesn't really occur to people typically till they're somewhere around 5, 6, 7 years old, where they realize, I am me. I am consistently the same person, right? I may do other things, but I am still me. It can happen younger that people figure out that, they're an individual, and that but the older they get, usually the more of a set of identities they have, and one of them is their core self, right? If you took everything else away, they'd still feel like they were them. That's their usual fallback, top level identity. Then they learn how to become a student. They go to school. They learn what a teacher is, which is another. Roles and identities is you can use them interchangeably, right? So you learn how to be a student. You may not learn how to be a good student, right? And so you may not have great success as a student. And so you may decide, I don't like school. But it may be that you don't have all the abilities, tools, viewpoints, skills that you need to be a great student, and therefore you give up on it. Or maybe your parents don't have the resources to fill your house with computers and books, so you start at a disadvantage, and everyone else knows how to do stuff and you don't quite know yet. So the awkwardness of first starting out as a student is compounded by others already being more advanced than you, right? And so some aspect of yourself is how you consider yourself, how good of a student you are. That's usually one of the initial markers of progress for children. Can they talk? Can they walk? Can they read a book? Can they study and learn new things? How well do they do? And that's usually the marker for children. Your job is being a student and growing up until you hit about 18. You may adopt all kinds of identities along the way, and as a teenager, people break out. That's when they go through all kinds of changes, where they experiment with being the cool guy, the jock, the student. With girls, I don't know exactly what ones they do, but each person is different. And who you are when you're 18, the identity that you choose actually to be most of the time, is usually very different than who you were when you were 12. There's some consistency between the two, but does that make sense?
It does. It does. And, matter of fact, I'm just kind of sitting here and just, as you're saying this to me, I'm thinking, when I was young, for instance, I know I tried several different things. Oh my gosh, I definitely did. And I was like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try, and I actually thinking about it, I've abandoned actually a lot of things that I, at one point thought it would be really cool to try and it would be so much fun to do. And I remember just like, this isn't working for me. This sucks. I was wrong. This is not meant for me. And it's not so much perhaps that it's meant. People say, well, this is meant for me, or it's just not my, not, anyone can learn anything really, a subject on any, right? It's just a matter of are they willing, and just how willing are they to learn something in terms of if it's a sport or if it's a particular, practice or whatever that it is, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me on that?
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
So usually, as you're going along, some things interest you, some things don't, right? And I don't believe anyone. There are people who have more restrictions as they start. There are people who develop illnesses. There are people who develop limits that they find very hard to overcome, right? And so they may change their goals because if your feet don't work properly, and I'm getting older and my feet don't work the way they used to, and they hurt more than they used to, and so I've learned to play a style of tennis where I stand there and make the other person run around instead of make them hit the ball back to me instead of me chasing the ball all over the place. It might have been smarter to learn from the get-go, but things change, and I do have limitations. There are physical limitations that I might be able to change with surgery and things like that, but it might be better if I just accepted I have this limit. How can I play within that or without that, and use it as an advantage, use it as a way to change the style with which I play. But these are a lot of sports metaphors, but this sort of thing can apply to relationships also, to particularly anything having to do with learning a new skill, right? But this brings me to something else I wanted to define, which is an intention, right? It's a reaching towards something being done, right? You feel like I'm trying to do this. So in your mind, you calculate what activities do I have to do to achieve some end. And it may go really fast. You may not think of it that way, but when you roll out of bed, you don't do it without intending to roll out of bed. It doesn't just happen that you fall out of unusual that you would just fall out of bed, right? So you get up, and in that there are a series of little things you might do, like turning sideways, putting my feet on the floor, standing up, checking my balance, stretching, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of little things that you might do, but the end goal was to get up. And here I am, I'm up, I've done it. Yay, good day, start, So that's an idea of a very simple intention, to get out of bed. You can have much more long-term intentions, like to become a masterful guitar player, right? And maybe you even have a specific style or artist you want to imitate, or do something like they do. In the progress of that, you're going to have to learn how to play a guitar, how to understand scales, and all the various different things that go into being a musician. They don't come naturally. Some people are more adept than others, but just about anyone can learn if they sit, have the basic necessities of playing guitar, 2 hands, a guitar, and a willingness to try, and some medium to study. So that's fairly basic stuff. The problems and the interesting stuff and the problems happen when you get to a level of skill, or you don't get to a level of skill because it's too hard, right? You thought it was going to be easier. You had an estimation that, 2 weeks I'll be able to play Stairway to Heaven, and people will be cheering for me or something like that. You might have this idea in your head. It might be a really false estimation of how much effort is involved. And when people realize how much effort goes into becoming really good at something, they often stop and say, well, I don't really want to spend that much time learning that, right? So they don't fully flesh out that identity. That's one way you can get stopped. Another way is you go out on stage, you have a horrible time, you don't do as well as you'd hoped, people mock you. It can be a traumatic experience, right? And in trauma is where things begin to really get warped. So you intended to be a guitar player, had a really bad time. Let's say something worse happens, like you have a Michael Jackson incident and your hair catches on fire. Actual physical pain happens. Your intention to create something wonderful and have a great effect with the crowd does not come to fruition, right? So you're stuck with this intention which hasn't come to fruition. You've got pain. So even if you decide, I'm never going to do this again, this is too embarrassing, too painful, I'm not going to do this, I'm not cut out for this. Some part of you had intended to become this great musician who did this in front of the crowd and gave them a great product. And that doesn't stop unless you decide to stop it. You have to remember, when I was a little kid and I wanted to be a fireman, I never did. And as soon as you realize that, it frees you to change your intentions. Okay? The tricky part is when you can't remember having made that intention in the first place. Right? So I don't know, let's say someone decided to be an astronaut and math was too hard, and math is required to be an astronaut, right? So they can't become the astronaut, but they're struggling with math, and now they're stuck in this hard thing of learning math, right? For a lot of people, it's very difficult. So they get really into learning math, but they forget their purpose. They no longer want to be an astronaut. They don't think it's realistic. Someone else is going to be the astronaut. I'm going to learn this math. But it ceases having purpose. It's no longer connected to the original intention, and so it doesn't have the energy and excitement, and it becomes just about solving the next problem, and it's difficult, and
right.
I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore, So, and that can keep happening to you, where the original intention, even the intention to learn math, can become so messed up that you're no longer trying to learn math. You're just trying to get the hell out of school. You don't want anyone to mess with you anymore. I can't learn, I'm stupid, they're smart. And what it really boiled down to was you never had developed the identity of a mathematician, which is a sub-identity of being an astronaut. So you have to kind of figure out what it is that you need to be able to do what you want to do. You have to figure out what you want to do. You have to figure out the things that are required. You have to become masterful at those things. And then you have to put it all together. And along the way, you're going to encounter disappointments, trauma, upsets, and those things can stop you from continuing down that path. So the two aspects of my practice would be, one is to get that crystal clear goal that you might have had when you were a kid, or that you have right now. Maybe all the goals you had when you were a kid You decide really we're silly. I had no estimation of the effort it would take. I was just a kid. Now I know what I really want to do, and it's X, right? So as soon as you find that thing that excites you, makes you want to do something, that's the thing that you might want to postulate as a real goal. Set yourself up with this as my real goal, right? As soon as you do that, you then have an easy task of figuring out, how do I get really good at this? How do I get the opportunity to do this? And those sorts of things. Have I gone too far?
No, 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 no. You know what? It definitely makes sense. What I actually want to do is kind of like, I want to take this a little bit more on just a bit more on a deeper personal level.
Okay.
What I mean by that is simply in terms of relationships, identities, when we deal with each other's identities, whether it is, also, and how it actually impacts in relationships. And not just that, it's really just in general, like as far as not just relationships, but any relationship with, whether if it's just be a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, or even just simple partnership through business, through work, and how it actually affects us on a daily basis too. Because maybe, in terms you encounter someone that is not so positive, let's just say, does not take a very positive identity on themselves. Maybe they're going through some turmoil, in their personal life, and maybe it's stopping them to, be more, it's stopping them to learn certain things. Maybe they're stressed because of whatever's going on in their life. And, and maybe that's why they come off not so nice sometimes, not so positive, and let's just say that you have another person that comes in that does take a positive, identity, and they encounter that negative identity and they deal with someone, and they're just, there's a kind of friction, that conflict going on, and they're just like, what the heck, I'm just trying to be a friend, I'm just trying to help you out, but in their mind they see it as, well, whatever, I don't care what, I got my thing going on for me. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, so the thing to remember is the simplest relationship is with yourself. It gets a lot more complicated when there's someone else involved, right? And ridiculously complicated when you have 3 or more people involved, because all of you have different intentions, goals, identities, purposes. So if my goal is to have a girlfriend and I've got one, but her goal was to have a husband and she doesn't have one yet, she has a boyfriend, we're actually at cross purposes. My purpose was to have a girlfriend. I didn't want a wife or something like that. Her goal was broader, bigger, to have a husband and a partner through life or something like that. So we'll get into fights where I seem satisfied and complacent and happy because everything is the way I want it to be. Got a girlfriend. Why do I need to be a husband on top of that? It's not what I wanted. So she's pushing me to be one way. I'm pushing her to be a different way. And then if you get a third person involved, say they're a friend of my wife's now or something like that, and they don't think that I'm living up to my obligations as a husband, right? Then I have her intentions, my intentions, and their intentions, which may be to support and help her at my expense,
Well, what about like family, more like parenting in terms of, like families are not getting along, daughters, sons, aunts and uncles, even just amongst, aunts and uncles as brothers and sisters, having issues with each other, in that aspect, like some, even to that sort, where it's just, I see a lot of conflict sometimes. I have friends that call me up and they are just going through some turmoil with their sons, with their daughters, and I even had, like, just the other day, I had a friend that called me up and she was in tears. It's like, it was not only just her relationship, she was going through just turmoil down with her whole entire family. And it's like, hey, I mean, this is the kind of things that, we encounter today, especially, like, a lot, I mean, I guess it's more so if you look for it, especially if you really see it, it's there, you kind of like, wow, what can, one do, what would you, inspiring words would be, or what can you say to people that, encourage them to understand what's happening?
Okay, so with children and their parents, again, you have a modeling thing that's going to happen, right? They're going to have seen you as an ideal person at one point in their life. Now you're not ideal, and they're becoming an adult, and they have a new idea of what the ideal is, and they want you to meet that ideal, right? They may forgive you and say, you're never going to be what I consider to be the ideal, and that's okay. I love you just the way you are. But most people don't do that. Most people will push you and push you and push you to get inside the identity they want for you, right? And when they do that, it's very uncomfortable for you, whether you're a parent or a child or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever you may be, whatever the relationship may be. If it's an employer and they want you to take over the company and you're there to get a paycheck while you go to school so you can do your own thing, it's going to be very uncomfortable because the whole time they're going to be trying to give you bigger projects. They're going to be disappointed in you for not taking on those projects. And you're happy because you're collecting your paycheck and you're ready to say goodbye. And it's not necessarily a fight for you, but you feel like you've disappointed them, all because you really didn't understand each other's goals for you, right? And in most relationships, while you might be open with the other person of what you want, people have a tendency to just agree and to do what you ask them to do. And they may never really understand what it is you want from them and constantly just be doing the next thing you ask them to do. And they can become confused and upset because they're no longer being the person they wanted to be or doing the thing they wanted to do. And that can come in and become a really big problem between people. So the best thing that I know of to avoid conflict with children is to find out what it is they want to do and help them do it, whatever it may be. Now, in today's world where they're expected to go to school, they're expected to do well in school, some children are not going to want to do that. And no matter how much you coax them, they're never going to want to be a good student. And that's what you have to do as a parent in those circumstances, is accept that that's not what they want to do right now. If you try to fight with them and force your goals and the identity you want for them onto them, you will get into World War III with your child. They will win because they will leave. They will go out to have their life. Or you will win and you will destroy their life by forcing them to do something they did not want to do so that they could meet your expectations of them, right? So they'll be deeply unhappy while you're wondering why they're not happy as can be. They've done everything you asked them to do. Why aren't they happy? I thought this would make you happy. So a big problem a lot of parents have with their kids is they worry about whether or not their kids are doing what society expects of them. They're hitting their benchmarks. I'm not sure what the ages are, but let's say 15 was the age you went into high school. At high school level, are you doing the things that you're expected to do? If not, how does it reflect on me as a parent? How bad of a parent am I that I couldn't get my son to read by the time he was in 9th grade? That sort of thing. So
it's the worry about the reputation.
There can be reputation involved, even if it's just reputation with the husband. Maybe the husband is angry because the child can't learn and expected the wife to be the one to teach them and never said so to her. It's just an expectation from a cultural norm that the mother takes care of the children and the father goes out and does work. And I know these cultural norms are changing now, and that I have no issue with that. My point is there's an expectation which was never stated. And so a person may not know what the expectation is, and so they can't meet it. And they feel deeply troubled by the fact that they haven't met the expectation, but it's never stated anyway. So it becomes really tough. So communication is key between people. You got to remember that these identities that we're forced to wear are not who we are. They're like a suit of clothes. They're all the abilities and perceptions and feelings that go along with doing something, but they're not the person themselves. So if you encourage a child to do the things they want to do, you're no longer fighting with them. In our current school system, that's really hard because if your kid wants to, I don't know, what do kids want to do now? If they want to go play Pokemon Go, right, and you want them to study their math homework, you're gonna have a big problem getting them to focus on doing their math homework when what they want to do is play Pokemon Go, right? So you can be reasonable with them and you can say, listen, Pokemon Go is not going to earn you a living. but kids don't really understand that until they get out of the house. So usually what I'm saying is you've got to engage them. You have to find out what their goals and purposes are and help them do those things. You may not be able to help them not go to school if they don't want to, or you may not be able to help them be the ideal student if they want to, or their teacher wants them to. But your allegiance to your child is to help them be the best person that they can be in their own estimation. If you're trying to force them to do what you want them to do, any force is going to cause a problem, right? So let them decide what identity they want to have, and they may be completely wrong at 13, and that's okay. You can be dead wrong. We all have been, And I was a punk rocker when I was 14 to 17 or so, and I took it very seriously. And I thought people who didn't love to listen to punk music were posers and liars and fools and suck-ups and sycophants and whatever other words you want to attach to them. And I was dead wrong. It's like I adopted a culture and a persona and an identity, and I got into it so much that I lost track of friends, my parents, my schoolwork, and I got really good at being a punk rocker. But that really wasn't what I had wanted to be when I was younger, and it wasn't, when I thought about it, what I wanted to do right then. It was just something fun to do, right? And it was an identity I slid into, and there were good people and good times. But if it had become my whole life, well, I guess if I was a good punk rock musician and that's what I'd wanted to be, I guess I'd be happy doing it. But it probably was wrong for me. So people are going to have to learn by trial and error. You have to let them fail. And a lot of parents don't want to see their kids fail. They don't want to see them sad. They don't want to waste time with silly goals, as they might observe them to be.
Right.
But until you engage your child and they learn that it was a silly goal, you have two different definitions of what a silly or an important thing are, and you're just going to fight. So it demands a little more of a parent to really pay attention to their child and find out what it is they want to do. So that would be my input on parenting, is engage your child's interests. They're going to be good at some things that other kids are not quite as good at. There might be someone out there in the world who's better at it, but your child's good at this. So get them books having to do with that subject. Help them.
All right. Well, that makes sense. You know what? That's pretty awesome what you have to say. But listen, what about, like, let's just say that the child is engaging into an identity that's toxic, or it is not, let's just call it not so pro for the best, for the good of all things, whatever. And they putting themselves in danger by, let's just say, drug experimenting or whatever it is. It's actually going to put them in danger or in a situation where that identity that you choose to take on, for instance, to try it out to see if this is they want, and rather if they like it or don't, in the long run, it's gonna, put them in a harm's way where it's gonna create damages, and it's not just to themselves; it's through the people that they are surrounded by. What would you have to say? Elaborate on that.
What are they trying to accomplish by taking the drugs? That's what you have to find out, right?
Right.
Are they fascinated with people who take drugs? Did they love the 60s music? Do they think you have to take drugs to be able to create that kind of music? Are they going for a certain artistic aesthetic that only heroin chic can match? Do they need to be 100 pounds like their friends who have what they consider to be the perfect figure or something like that? You really have to find out what it is, because for each person it's different. When I was a teenager, I tried every manner of thing that there was to be tried. So what was I trying to do? Very different from some of my other friends who might have been, I don't know, trying to get out of the house, and their friend had drugs, and so they could go to their friend's house. Now they're out of their parents' hair. They can take some drugs. They don't really care about the drugs, whatever. Whereas their friend might be like a true adventurer who wants to go on an adventure with the drugs, and they consider it an adventure. If you can engage and find out what the reason is that your child wants to take drugs, and make them conversant with it, because a lot of people, like, the first time I smoked pot, it was because someone handed it to me, and I didn't want to look like a douche. That's what it boiled down to, right? I didn't want to be the guy who's like, oh, no, I won't try it. So I tried it, and I liked it. But that doesn't mean that everyone would or should try pot. It was a bad reason. It was a bad reason for me to try it. is just because I didn't want to look like the kid who wouldn't try something. But there's a lot of pressures on teenagers to try things, and maybe I would have tried those things on my own at a different time. But at the time when I did try it, it was because someone offered it to me and I didn't want to refuse. Didn't want to not be cool, right? So each kid is going to have their different reasons. Does that sort of get at where you're going with?
Yeah, it is. I mean, is this why, would you say that part of the reason why, even parents, they want their children to be take on certain identity, they work so hard, or not just even parents, just even relationships, or, whatever, even at work, they're maybe just afraid of or concerned of that the person's gonna, take a certain, direction by doing those certain things and taking on that certain identity. Is that why would you say people just are so adamant about instilling a particular identity of being good and go to school and become a doctor, become a successful person, and not really, allowing people, like kids or anybody for that matter, to be themselves, and because they're just so concerned of what's going to happen, what's what is, they're just kind of like just wanting to keep person out of the harm's way, so to say, and maybe
Also,
that's what it is.
as a parent, you have a certain degree of responsibility for your child. You have to keep them safe. You have to bring them to school according to law. You have to keep them healthy, provide food.
Of course.
So these are expectations of the parent, right?
Right.
Beyond that, as a parent, there's really no hard, fast rules. There's no handbook for parents. There used to be the Dr. Seuss book for bringing up your baby or something like that, but there's certain things that you have to do and not do. You don't poison your child, you take care of them.
Yeah, common sense things, right.
All the good things that children need to have happen. But beyond that, it's really not your job as a parent to tell your child what to do with their life. We're not in the Middle Ages. They're not going to copy exactly what you did and inherit your estate. Some people may be lucky. Their father was a doctor, so now all they have to do is, their dad's going to pay for school, become a doctor, take over his practice. You don't ever have to branch out and do anything for yourself. That's easy, or a businessman might turn over his business to his child. If the child wants that, that's totally fine and dandy. The trick and the trouble begins when you don't really know what your child's goal is and you're trying to push things on them that they don't want or have no interest in, right? So then it becomes about force and compulsion to do things, or rewards. Maybe you could give them rewards. My mom had a system where she gives us stars and black balls for behavior on a day. And you wanted to get more stars, but sometimes you just got a black ball because you were going to get a black ball, So that sort of thing, she was trying to push me by saying, he wants a star, you get 5 stars, you get 50 cents, you can go buy a candy or whatever. Back in the day, you could buy a candy for 50 cents. So, yeah, she was trying to help in the way that she knew how to help, My view is that a good parent needs to understand their child. It takes a little bit of time, but no more time than fighting with them all the time, trying to push them to do things for your reasons. If they don't even know what your reasons are, because you don't feel they're old enough to understand, or you want to shelter them from certain realities, then they don't really understand what you're trying to do or why you're trying to do it, and they're not on your team. So you need to be on the same team. This doesn't mean you have to be their best friend. It doesn't mean you have to do everything they want to do, but you have to be working together to get them where they want to go, So sometimes as a parent, you're just tired and you don't want to engage with all that, and that's fine. I'm not trying to say every minute of every day has to be spent scoping out your child, figuring out what they want to do, and
right.
activity. Just allow them to experiment. Now, I understand what you're saying. Some identities are extremely dangerous. Some things that they're going to pursue are going to be dangerous. That's when you want to communicate a lot, and you can't start doing it when they're 16. By that time, they're probably not going to open up to you. They might, but they're probably not going to. If they're not used to opening up to you all the time, chances are if you start when they're 16, it's too late. You haven't heard them all their life, and now you're checking in on me. why? What do you care about what I want? That sort of thing. You've always told me what to do. You've never consulted my desires. So why should I listen to you now when I don't have to anymore? That sort of thing comes into play. So that can be overcome with more high quality communication, even if you did wait that long, but it's a lot harder. So with children and parenting, that would be my recommendation: is find out where they want to go, find out what their strengths are, engage their strengths. Don't push them into things they don't want to do unless you can get their agreement that it's something that they're interested in and they want to do, you know?
Right.
So, but and there are ways to do that, even with unpleasant tasks like cleaning your room, cleaning the house. You know, if they understand how much easier it makes your life, they may well be interested in helping you if you show how interested you are in helping them, you know? So my view on it is it's teamwork. I think that's a fairly modern view. Um, the old school way was, you know, you do what I say or you get the hand. You know, it could either be like that or like that. But that's no longer acceptable. It never really was. It was just people were out straight. They didn't have time to talk to their kids. Jobs used to require, you know, sun up to sundown just to make enough to live to survive. So things have changed, and now we can engage children. All throughout time, there have been prodigies, but there's no prodigy whose parent didn't buy them a piano. You know what I mean? You're not Mozart if someone didn't give you a piano, you know, or if you didn't at least get to play on one at some point in your life. So you got to find out what they do well, and not every kid's going to be a prodigy, but some are. And even if they're not a prodigy, they're going to have something they do well. And if you strengthen that, they gain confidence, they gain skills, and then they might be more interested in learning other things, you know, that might be considered harder by them once they've got some mastery of something they wanted to do. So does that help?
It does. And, you know, it's actually very cool to hear, you know, because it just puts a new perspective on things, and even just makes certain things to me that never have made sense to me before. And just kind of recalling some things, you know, me being a child, and, you know, when I was little, and even through my adolescent years and my teenage years and my, you know, in my first early 20s, you know, and, you know, just the things that I've been through, and, you know, the situations that I've encountered, of certain things that people, you know, expected of me. I'm just kind of recalling, like, you know what, that is such a cool way to, to look at it, you know, how you are presenting it right now. And, you know, let me ask you this, you know, and this is, you know, identities and stuff that we take on and that we encounter, rather they are, you know, imposed on us, you know, and people expect us to be a certain way. But, you know, even just in relationships between husband and wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, you know, work. But let's just talk a little bit more about husband and wives and boyfriend, girlfriends. You know, just this is for like just general. You know, sometimes relationships, they tend to kind of quarrel, not get along, not work out. You know, and is it because, would you say that it's the different identities that have a clash, that have a collision, that's just not really working out together, or it's just simply just for lack of communication? Or would you say it's all of the above? You know, how would you elaborate on that?
Well, identities are a really big subject, right? It's like,
It is.
an identity can be something as simple as, you know, I'm the guy who's going to open this door right now. Or it can be much more complicated with a lot more sub skills involved. And that's the trick, is to find out where you're comfortable, push yourself a little now and again. But the conflict between people often arises when the expectations are incorrect, right? So communication has to happen so you have a good, accurate estimate of what the other person wants in the relationship. You know, there are certain basics that are sort of assumed, but if they're not talked about, some people may not have the idea of exactly what it is that you wanted, or she wanted, or whatever, you know. So you have to really make it clear what you want, and to do that, you have to know what you want. And a lot of people are not conversant with themselves. They have never really examined and inventoried all their skills, passions, desires. And they're broken it out so they can see it all very clearly. they may know who they are, and this is not to put anyone down. It's not a common thing. But people are getting more into it now with meditation, ongoing therapy, various different education methods, but it wasn't always the case that you wanted to really understand yourself. But without understanding yourself and what you want, you can't really be happy except by accident. You know, you accidentally met the perfect person. And we hear about those great love stories where you see it on movies all the time. The person meets someone, they fall in love, and they're happily ever after. And that can happen, but it's awfully rare. The chances are the person you met reminded you of someone who you liked, dressed in a way that made you think of good times in the past, or whatever. They liked some music that you liked. They ate food that you enjoyed. And so you assumed that they were going to also be the sort of person who liked the movies you like, would also enjoy a football game now and again, or whatever it is you enjoy doing, because someone else did it in the past. So you have this expectation of them, and they may let that down. And if you don't tell them in a very non-judgmental way of, oh, I had this expectation, I was wrong to have the expectation and not tell you, and now I feel disappointed because you didn't meet that expectation, that can feel threatening to a person to hear. But it's much better than not knowing and constantly failing to meet the other person's expectations. So the expectations game is really tricky, and is made a lot easier by good, clear communication.
Right. So when we set our expectations that are too high, and then we set ourselves up for disappointment, and then next thing you know, you're upset with yourself, and you're upset with the other person, your friend, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Your business partner at work, doesn't matter. So when we set expectations that are unrealistic, or simple for the fact that of not communicating what my expectations are of that particular person.
Right.
So this is
where they're going to meet them when they aren't actually going to meet them. There's deception involved in many relationships. You get together for the first time, you go out on a date. Some guys are just, all they want to do is get in the sack. They don't give a damn about what someone has to say to them. They might later, after they've got what they wanted done, right? So there's deception going on there. There's a false expectation set up by the guy saying, let's go out and have ice cream, but he's really thinking something else is going to happen. She's like, ice cream sounds good. Maybe I'll get to know the guy, but he's got this other expectation, and if it doesn't happen, he's upset. And he's not going to talk about why, because he knows it may have been too much to ask or expect, but those unvoiced expectations often come from deception, right? So it's honest, clear communication that's required, and it's very hard to have the viewpoint that you're going to do that all the time, because sometimes it's dangerous, to be honest. All of us have pasts, and not everything we've ever done has been the greatest thing in the world, right? So sometimes you've done things you don't want other people to even know about, and if you won't tell them, then there are certain areas that will always be cloudy between you, because you'll never answer that question. You'll always dodge that subject. So that area becomes something they'll poke and prod all the time, because you're not telling them the truth, and they know you're not telling them the truth. You can't get to know someone really well and not know when they're not telling you something, So that's a trick, and it's an evil trick people play on each other, but it's a defense. You're trying to get what you want. Doesn't necessarily mean you're an evil person to try to do those sorts of things, but almost nobody lays their cards down on the table when they start a relationship, whether it be romantic or work. A lot of people fudge their resumes. They'll lie about the skills they have. They'll lie about their experiences. And if you call them on it, it's almost rude. It's rude to say, oh, you didn't do that. That's not true, and you know it. But if you don't have honest communication, these false expectations get set up, and conflict ensues. So the genuine communication is critical and important, but rare. So in order for a relationship to go further, that kind of genuine communication has to be there, and ideally it's been there from the start. But who lays everything they've ever done? It's not even possible. I'm 46 years old. If I tried to tell you what my life's experience was in 10 minutes, it's not possible,
I understand.
Yeah. So I wanted to touch on a few other things, but and wrap up a little because I see we're hitting close to our time. I'm willing to go beyond, but I just wanted to, there was a few things I wanted to touch on,
Go ahead.
which that trauma sticks in tension, right? So if you don't figure out what the intention was, you can't change it. So it's fine and dandy to have the intention, I'm going to get onto the beach. But if that means you have to fix your car, and you'll be damned if you'll ever touch a car again because of that time where you tried to fix it and nothing ever worked ever again the way you wanted it to, and your car's broken in the driveway, you're upset as soon as you go outside to your car. It's not working the way you wanted it to. You can't go down to the beach. Big fight with your car, right? And that's just a car. So that's not even a serious trauma. That's a very light upset, right? There's degrees of these things. But if you didn't ever address the reason why you can't stand fixing your car, you'll never be good at fixing your car. You may decide that's for mechanics, or, and maybe it is today with the way how complicated things are. But my point is that you can have intentions and identities in conflict within yourself, right? You can have multiple identities. For an example would be I wanted to be a punk rocker, but I also had been a very good student, and the two did not go well together. What kind of punker is sitting at home doing his homework? Maybe some did, but I wasn't that guy, right? So in being a good punk rocker, I was being a terrible student. In being a great student, I may have become a terrible punk rocker. People might have seen me as a poser or as a faker, and so sometimes they're in conflict, and those conflicts need to be resolved, and they can't be if the reason you wanted to be a punker isn't addressed. So just the way you would address someone else to get them to engage with you as part of your team, you need to consult yourself and say, why is it that I want to go out on Friday night? What does that do for me? How does that make me happier or better? Why do I need to do that? When you know that, then maybe you can take the reason why you wanted to be a good student, and maybe they're the same reason, maybe they're not, but you can decide to let one of them go to do the other and be at peace with yourself. So
may I ask a question?
I stop for a second. We got a little feedback. Go ahead.
May I ask a question in terms of, is this why we sometimes have the mood swings of feeling a certain way, or the conflict of emotion? One moment, we find ourselves, fighting with our emotions in terms of debating how we feel about a situation or that identity that we take on. Would you say this is why we feel sometimes happy or sad, or just kind of up and downs with our emotions?
It certainly can. So the reason would be, are you familiar with the term triggers?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the idea would be some triggers bring forth one identity or another in you. Like if someone looks like my sister, I'm going to slide into my role as a brother, as her brother, as I was at the time when we were real close, when we were young and stuff like that. So this all happens without me thinking, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a brother, but it happens. And so that might make her feel uncomfortable, or that wasn't the reaction she wanted, was a brother to show up, So your emotions are often triggered by the identity that you're in. So if an identity is called up that has a different emotion than the one you're in, sort of like it's a good way to look at it is, not to get too technical, but programming, and I won't go at length about it. Different files have different properties, and you've probably seen this with times, location that the file was made, that sort of thing, whenever you've written a document. Right. So if a time comes up for which you have a document, that document comes forward to your view. Your mind works very much in an associative fashion most of the time. Unless you're laser focused on something, it's just a bunch of associations causing changes in emotion, objectives that you might have for the day. That might get thrown out the window if you hear an AC/DC song and now you want to go to the bar and get loaded. Different things are associated with different activities. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about triggers causing an identity to pop up. It's not necessarily conscious. You may not even be aware of it, but something in your environment signals. Your mind realizes that signal and has an identity which matches that. And that identity comes forward. It's been successful in the past, so why wouldn't it be now? And it tends to be automatic. These things are automatic. And when they're automatic, remember, you've stopped growing, right? So to be a master at something, you can't be thinking about the skill in terms of like when you're playing guitar. This is an example that Brady gave in his book. You don't want to be thinking about scales and notes and things. You want to be thinking about a melody that you're trying to keep or a rhythm that you're trying to keep. If you're so concerned about placing your finger in the right place on the fretboard that you can't remember what the melody was, it's a big disaster. And the same is true in just about any activity. If you get stuck in a detail that you hadn't mastered, it's likely that you're going to come to a screeching halt. And a good example for this is driving, right? When you first learned to drive, a lot of people I've talked to couldn't have the radio on because they needed intense concentration so they did not crash, right? And they're afraid of dying. You know, they're afraid of hitting someone or failing miserably, looking stupid, whatever. So they can't have the radio on. They can't have someone talking to them because they need to focus completely on all these skills of holding the steering wheel the right way, pressing the gas pedal in the right way. Back in the day when we had clutches and sticks and stuff like that, you had to have all these things going on. But they couldn't be something you were thinking about while you were driving down the road. That has to come naturally. Otherwise, you're not looking at the road. You're looking at the stick shift or the clutch or something else. You're not paying attention to what you're doing, and you become a bad driver while you're trying to master some sub-skill. Same is true in relationships. Now, if you're not good at communication, if you haven't done an inventory of your wants, needs, and desires, then you don't really know how to communicate. You don't know what to communicate, even if you could. You know, so those skills have to be learned by people in order for them to have good, successful relationships. Or the other person has to be a saint, very patient person who knows how things work and can tolerate the other person's incompetence at communication or understanding them. You know, so that's my view on it. Each person has a responsibility to know themselves and to pay attention to what they're doing. And knowing yourself is not something, it's assumed that everyone knows themselves. You know, back in the 60s, you wanted to find yourself, right? So I guess some people are still trying to do that now. But the truth is there's no way to do that people know of. So some people try to do it in therapy. Some people try to do it through meditation, try to learn to hear themselves. Some people in prayer, they try to find out, you know, what God wants from them. Sorry, I've got a big fat kitty that wants to join me really badly.
That's okay.
I'm engaging him. So yeah, so the point of that is not everyone has the skills to be successful in a relationship. And they'll go from relationship to relationship until they learn those skills. Or they'll eventually just decide not to be in any more relationships and live on their own. And that's fine too, if that's what you want, you know. But you don't want to limit yourself, to get back to limits, based on a lack of a skill that you could learn. Skills like communication are learnable. You know, understanding yourself is learnable. This is not a deep mystery that it can't be solved. It's known how to do these things. It's not widely known, and it is more difficult than just, you know, lighting another cigarette and moving on with your job. But it can be done, and the value in doing it is immense. So this little guy would like my full attention. But anyway, does that help? I mean,
it does. You know, and
even in parallel relationships. Go ahead.
My question to you is, all the audience that we have right now that are tuning in, listening, even the ones that are interacting, and the ones that are just simply just sitting back and listening, you know, and I just like we just talked about, everyone's got something going on, one form of identity to another that they're dealing with, and they're just trying to kind of figure out, you know, what do I do and how do I figure myself out? You know, what would your encouragement be today to the audience? And then also, I want you just to kind of just also tell, you know, like just share about what you do and stuff. And is there any books that you perhaps recommend, or how can people, if they're all looking for help, how to reach out to you? and just kind of about that.
Sure.
All right.
So I would recommend some books. The Beyond Psychology book, which I held up before, I'll hold it up again now, by Dr. Gabodi. It's a great book that gets into a lot more detail about how an identity is formed, what an intention is, its relationship to attention. So that's a simple relationship that I'll break down right quick. If an intention is to reach out and create an effect in the world, attention is the intention to receive an effect from the world, right? So perception is trying to understand your environment. You have an intention to hear whatever's hearable, see whatever's seeable, all that stuff. So they're not two different things. Intention and attention are essentially the same thing. And if you're finding you don't have a lot of attention left to live your life, it's usually because you have so many intentions stirred up that you simply don't have enough. If you talk about a computer, you don't have enough memory to have all these things going on at once, and you crash. It's too much. You can't form an intention to pay attention to someone else, to listen to what they have to say. So sometimes you have to be quiet and listen to yourself. What's being stirred up in me, and all you have to do is acknowledge that something has been, and then you can listen to the other person, right? But if you don't listen to yourself, you can't listen to the other person sometimes because it gets in the way. I think I missed something there. Some part of your question. Oh, as regards to my practice, if a person has a specific unwanted feeling, emotion, sensation, attitude, intention, identity, I work with them to find out how it was formed, where it came from. And I do that through a method called traumatic incident reduction. Another book here by a late friend of mine, died very recently. Great small little book that will tell you how to use that procedure. But what it boils down to is having the person recall what a time when they had that feeling or sensation or intention or identity, and then go back through a chain of them of association until they realize the intentions and the intentions and the circumstances when they formed those intentions. Then they can be liberated from those identities or the emotions or whatever else that's bothering them. And it sounds simple, and it is simple, but it can take hours, sometimes 15 or 20 hours to get through most of. If a person has had a light trauma life, 15 or 20 hours will address most of the things that really hurt them. Some people need more time, some people less. But once you've done that, then you are much more at liberty to form new intentions in the present. And you have a much more accurate perception of the environment around you. So you'll face less trauma, less conflict, because you're accurately perceiving the environment and can come up with a real solution or goal. Whereas if you have when you're a child and you don't understand how the world works, you really don't know what a realistic thing might be that you could do that fits who you are. And it's going to take some time to figure all that out. So the two parts of my practice that address it is, one, you address trauma, and I broadened that definition out to upsets, anytime you intended something and it didn't come to fruition. All right. So when that happens, you tend to get stuck in the frustration of that not happening, and that frustration will persist with you until it comes to fruition or you let it go. And letting it go sounds easy, and it frustrates and makes a lot of people angry when you say that. Just let it go, man. It's no big deal.
Right.
It is a big deal to them, or they would have let it go. But usually the reason is because they don't know why it's such a big deal, but it sure as hell is to them. They might be crying, they might be raging. They don't know why it's such a big deal or why it became such a big deal, but they can't let it go. That's when you go through that procedure of, okay, tell me about a time when you had that feeling of frustration. And they do that. That brings up another thing in their mind. I was talking about the associative chains earlier. These chains of association are important, and they're not logical. So where you thought it was going to go, maybe as a classic Freudian, you thought all their problems went back to a frustrated sex drive. And they're not telling you that. It's something completely different. The truth is, each person is different. And it becomes really apparent when a symptom that one person complains about is caused by something very different than the next person that complains about that same symptom. That's why I have an objection to labels like depression, because what depression means to one person may be very different to what it means for another person, and its source may be completely different. It may be trauma, or it might be a frustrated ambition. You have to find out what it means in their terms, and that's the key part. Is you can't label a person with your terms and then try to solve it from your perspective. They're coming to you for help. They're not trying for you to solve their problems for you. You have to find out what the problem is in their terms and in their world, and solve it in their terms and in their world.
Wow, that is so true. That is so awesome. I absolutely agree with you on that. That is very powerful right there. And because ultimately, in my experience, anyways, I think that, yeah, like there's a lot of times where people are like, what's wrong with you? And they're, my experience where we've heard this throughout our lifetime growing up, even being teenagers, you're depressed. This is what you need. Well, how do you know what I need? Perhaps you're not hearing me in terms of what I'm feeling, what I'm, going through emotionally, mentally, and how I'm connecting, or what I'm trying to make sense of what I'm going through is not your term of what you're calling me or labeling me as, So yeah, that I just think it's so powerful, and it's so true what you just said right there. And I think it's so important is people want to be understood, they want to be heard, and yeah, we come to each other for help, to be listened to, but we're not looking for someone to solve our problems on their terms, just like what you just said. And I think that's a lot of times, sadly enough, that's how today in the world, that's how we operate,
Yeah, so often that comes from people not feeling that they have enough time. They don't want to deal with your shit as well as their own. That's what it boils down to. So they put you in a box, and you don't want to be in the box. It's like nobody puts mommy in the corner. You don't do that to me. So or baby in the corner, whatever the phrase is, right? You don't. That's disrespectful. To tell someone what they are is really disrespectful, because they may not even know what they are. How the heck could you? It's on the inside of them that all these processes are going on. And for you to think you know what's going on inside another person is really disrespectful. It sells them short. They're deep well. Each person is. We've had years and years of time to go over in our minds what all these things that happen to us mean. And to have someone else give you a label or tell you what you need when they haven't really heard you out, it feels really insulting, and it's no basis for help. I wanted to point this out. A big difference between the metapsychology model that I use and a lot of other models is how we define help. It's help in the other person's terms, right? So I'm not there to make a diagnosis. I'm not there to solve an illness. I'm there to hear the other person, what their issue is, what their concern is, what caused it, and then by letting them look at it in their own time, long as it takes. I have no set session length. It's not a 50-minute hour. It could go 5 hours, could go 20 minutes, whatever a person really has the attention span to go over, and however long it takes, right? But the critical component that makes it so different is doing things in the other person's terms, in the time it takes for them to do them, without pushing them, without making it unsafe, without judgment. And also, we work towards a result called an endpoint, where a person feels better. They feel better because they've been heard. They feel better because they figured something out. They know something that they may not have known for a long time about themselves. It may be that they forgot this about themselves, that this happened to them, that they made this decision, and that it's been haunting them ever since. There's a lot of ways that these things happen, and they're not logical, right? So they have their own internal consistent logic, but it's not like you say they're depressed, therefore something bad happened to them, and now we need to give them 130 minutes should be fine discussing that thing that happened to them, and then they shouldn't be depressed anymore. No, it happens on their time schedule. It may be a very complex cause for a specific emotion, but you have to track it back to the source and let them do that. And that's the trick. Is in a professional context, most insurance companies are only going to pay for a 50-minute hour. They're not going to pay you for 5 hours. So as a person who's working with other people, you have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit in terms of how many clients you can see in a day in order to make that one client resolve their issue so well that they need far less time total, right?
Right.
Giving them your undivided attention for as long as it took. And that's much better than half of your attention, which stretches out to 30 years on the couch, right?
Right.
Okay. So the end point would be the person feeling better, they have a realization about themselves, and they're no longer stuck in that feeling or that identity. They feel liberated and free and bigger than they were before, or sometimes they feel out of their body, sometimes they feel out of their mind. They might start laughing crazily. But the thing is they're free of this thing that was holding them for a long time. And so they feel liberated. That liberation is real. And it can then free them to pursue much more satisfactory life in the present and in the future, rather than beating their head against things that have been holding them back for a long time.
Wow, wow, wow. Kevin, that is so awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much for, doing this tonight and coming on a show and speaking about all this. This is just such, and for all you guys that are listening right now, this video, it's actually going to stay on my YouTube channel here. I'm actually going to go ahead and post this video also on my page on Let's Only Be Positive. Kevin's also going to go ahead and he can share this video too. Kevin, let's just say if people want to pursue your services, how can they get in contact with you?
Okay, I have a website that has all my contact information. I'm at clear-objectives.com. And then my phone number is there, my email address is there, and I answer anything and everything that comes in. So feel free to call me about anything and everything. I also am happy to shoot the breeze sometimes if I don't have something else to do. But mostly I really want other people to learn how to do this. It's actually an amazingly simple thing to do for people. It doesn't take 20 years of education. It takes 4 or 5 weekends to learn the techniques you need to be able to help another person get through their heavily charged emotionally issues. And then it might take another couple of weekends to learn how to help them create a viable plan to get where they want to go. The bottom line is, if you're willing to help people, it's actually very easy. It's been made to seem very difficult and complicated, and I know that there are a lot of professionals out there that are doing it and banging their heads against the wall. I've actually been in classrooms where they learned this technique, and suddenly they're elated because now they know they can help. They are armed with a toolbox full of techniques that do work, and in the past they've had to pick and choose from lots of different areas of study. So find people who do TIR and metapsychology in your area, and you will find rapid resolution of almost any sort of emotional or psychological issue, although that's not really the goal. The goal is to learn to know yourself so you can go where you want to go.
Awesome. That is so wonderful. Hey, Kevin, thank you so much. And to all of my audience right now, real quick, also, I'm going to go ahead and post also Kevin's information, his websites. If you guys did not, hear or understand what, he gave his information in terms of website and stuff, I'll go ahead and post that on my page, which is on Facebook. It's called Let's Only Be Positive. And he's got some great books, which I'll also go ahead and share on Let's Only Be Positive on Facebook. The books that he recommends, his website, and also this video for those of you that didn't get to just coming in now or just were like came in halfway through. I'm gonna go ahead and post this video also so you guys can go ahead and listen to it again and listen to it as many times as you want. This is a wonderful message. I wish you guys all a wonderful night, and thank you so much for joining. And one more thing before I go. You know what? We're going to be doing a next live YouTube show, which is going to be about communication, just all about communication. Isn't that right, Kevin?
Sure.
And we're going to be doing that, and that's going to be so amazing to listen to, because again, you know, you guys heard him say earlier, communication is everything. It's so important. And so we're gonna just next time, our next show that we're gonna be doing is gonna be all about communication. You guys have a wonderful night. Stay blessed, and we will see you in the next video.
And thank you for being willing to listen to me. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thanks, Kevin. All right. Bye, everybody.